Hi, everybody. It's Mrs. Schultz here with our read aloud for today, which is chapter 4 in A Handful of Stars. And behind me, I will be posting the work that we do on the Google Classroom in materials under read aloud. This is the chart that we started as a Google Doc, and we started with my sample about Salma and how the social issue she's experiencing is that she's a migrant worker, she's from a poor family, and she has to move a lot, which then if you're moving all the time, it's very hard to establish like really good, strong relationships for some people. And then for the text evidence, Lily brought it up that it's very hard for you guys to know page numbers because it's a read aloud and you don't have a copy. So if we just keep it within the particular chapter, that would be perfect. So I found this information in chapter 1 when Cynthia Lord, who is the author, explicitly takes the time to describe to the reader about Salma's life, what the barracks look like that she's living in, what conditions, the fact that she has to move to find work with her family, the fact that she's a child and she's working, not going to school. I mean, these are all things, well, she goes to school, but she has to work in the fields first, right? So clarification on that. So there's all these different little tidbits that Cynthia Lord takes the time to explain to us. The one I added yesterday is about Lily, our main character. Her mother left her to be raised by her grandparents. Well, that's a social issue. We discussed that during our Google Hangout. It's a social issue because somebody brought up the great point of, well, what happens if her parents pass or grandparents pass away because they're old? Then what happens to her? That was something that came up in our discussion. And also, you want to be raised by your parents. You have that desire. So that's definitely a social issue. Now, my text evidence is quite long, and you'll see that because I'll type it on our Google Doc that I'm using. I said found in chapter 3, Lily states, but I think the real reason grandmother doesn't like Lucky, Lucky being the dog, is because she blames him for Mama being gone. They had a fight about Lucky one night, and Mama left, slamming the door, leaving a hole behind her as wide as the whole world. It's not literally a hole, right? It's a hole in the world for Lily because her mom basically just walked out and never looked back. And that's really, really hard for her. So, as we dive into chapter 4, which is a lot shorter than chapter 3, we want to continue our work. We want to see other social issues if we can find them and get them on our Google Doc so that we can keep track of this as a way of jotting, okay? So I'm going to be on the hunt as a reader, and I hope you will too as a listener, okay? So, chapter 4. I like how she puts blueberries on all the beginning of the chapter since it's about the blueberry barons in Maine. I think that's a pretty neat idea. All right, you want to see the kids. I know, you miss your kids. Okay, here we go. Skittles and I are going to read chapter 4 to you. The next morning, when I came downstairs to the store, Salma's bee house wasn't on the drying shelf. The sign was still there. All my bee houses were lined up on the shelf just as I'd left them. But Salma's was gone. Beside me, Caleb Dow and Jacob Dunlap were fixing their coffee at the coffee station. I know, Caleb said to Jacob as he poured sugar into his cup. If the town had fixed it right the first time, oh, good morning, Lily, we wouldn't be in this mess. As a reader, I'm saying to myself, what kind of mess? And I'm also projecting that possibly people really liked Salma's idea of just that free drawing onto the bee house. Hey, Lucky! Jacob ran his hand over Lucky's head before picking up a little wooden coffee stirrer. Didn't I tell you that? It's going to cost twice as much because they tried to cut corners. As soon as I had Lucky settled under my table, I turned and headed for the front of the store, bumping Caleb on my way. Careful, Lily, this is hot. Grandfather was ringing up Mrs. Putney, buying some milk. Usually I wouldn't interrupt, but Grandpa, one of the bee houses that was drying is missing. Do you have it? He grinned. Do you mean that razzle-bedazzled one? Well, I sold it. My mouth dropped open. You sold it? To who? Have a nice day now, Grandfather said to Mrs. Putney. I hope your company enjoys their trip to Bar Harbor. You tell them to get there early. It can be hard to find parking downtown in the afternoon. I squeezed my lips shut, waiting for her to leave. But as soon as I heard the bell ring over the door, the words rushed out. Who bought the bee house? I don't know. The lady's name, really. She just came in and bought it. Just a tourist passing through. She came in to pay for her gasoline. And she saw that fancy bee house. She wanted it bad, so I checked to see if the paint was dry, and it was. Didn't you show her the others? I asked. The ones for sale up by the gardening supplies? I did, but she had her heart set on that flashy one. She called it art. I felt a little sour that the lady didn't think mine was art. Still, a sale was a sale. Every bit of money was a help. When 3 o'clock came, Lucky knew Selma was there before I did. Maybe he could smell her, or maybe he already knew the sound of her footsteps. But I heard his tail thump on the floor under my table. Hi, Lucky! As Selma patted his head, he wagged all over her. Even his tongue swung back and forth with happiness. We sold the bee house you painted yesterday, I said. In fact, Grandfather sold it before it was even for sale. The lady who bought it really liked it. That's great, said Selma. This morning, while I was raking, I saw some of those little blue mason bees. They put me in the mood to paint bees today. I handed her the blue paint, but Selma said, No thanks, my bees are going to be pink. She's such a free spirit. I like that about her. Pink? I opened my mouth, but she was already opening the pink paint. Just because one lady had liked Selma's crazy colored bee house didn't mean I could sell more of them. Flowers came in lots of colors, but bees? Have you ever seen a pink bee? I asked. Selma nodded. Sure, in my imagination. Don't you like to imagine, Lily? Sometimes, I answered slowly. My favorite thing to pretend was that Mama was behind me, invisible to everyone else. Every now and then, she'd whisper things in my ear, things like, I'm proud of you, when I did good in school, or you look as pretty as the tiger lilies I saw on that first day, when I'm dressing up for church. Things Grandmother didn't ever say, even maybe she thought them, but she didn't say them. I picked up my paintbrush. I've never imagined pink bees, especially with orange stripes. I imagine all the time, Selma said. That's how I keep work from being boring. Raking blueberries is buggy, and sometimes it's so hot that sweat is dripping all over me by the time we're done. We both made an icky face. But when you pretend, life can be any way you want it to be. So I imagine it better. Today I imagined I was a princess and the fields were really my lands. But an evil queen had cast a spell over everyone, so we all had to pick her blueberries. Tell me a chore that you hate to do and I'll show you how to imagine it better. I said, trying to think of something really bad. Picking up dog poop in my yard, maybe? Selma giggled. Well, that's a hard one. Maybe you could imagine it's something wonderful that you're picking up. Seashells, or treasure, or Easter eggs. Easter eggs? I asked. We both burst out laughing. Okay, maybe that's too weird, Selma admitted. But you see what I mean. Watching her paint blue daisies for her pink and orange bees, I wondered how she could just pick colors like that and have faith that her colors would look good. I looked down at the blueberry stencil taped to the front of my bee house. Maybe I could try stenciling the leaves red, like they turn in the fall, just for something different. But if the leaves were red, it would be autumn. There wouldn't be any berries on the plants. It wouldn't make any sense. So I picked up the green paint and went to work like I normally did. We're seeing a difference in the girls. Lily is very literal and takes everything for how it's supposed to be. Whereas Selma has this whole other side to her where she lives outside of the box, right? She's like imagining a world different from her own. And I think that's very magical. And that may bring something out of Lily that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. And that's the magic of a friendship, is that we can bring these two people that are so different together and it changes them forever. So I will meet you on that Google Doc, and I hope that you found some examples that maybe you could add, maybe not from this chapter, but chapters before, and we'll come back together during our Google Hangout or Zoom, whichever we choose to use. But that is your chapter for the day on A Handful of Stars.